The sun blazed mercilessly over the cracked earth of the village square. Flies buzzed in the heat, and the smell of dust and sweat hung thick in the air. A rickety wooden platform had been hastily erected in the center of the square. Upon it stood a gaunt, hollow-eyed man, his clothes tattered, his voice hoarse as he shouted at the sparse, silent crowd gathered before him. "Strong girl," he barked, placing a rough hand on the shoulder of the eldest of 4 young women standing behind him. "She can cook, clean, carry water. Just like her mother before, 10 dinars to start." The girl flinched at his touch but said nothing. Her face was expressionless, but her eyes told another story: fear, shame, and something deeper, resignation. Next to her stood her 3 sisters, clinging tightly to one another. The youngest couldn't have been older than 13. Their hair was uncombed, their sandals worn thin. Not one of them dared to look up. No one in the crowd spoke. A few men shifted uncomfortably, some shaking their heads and walking away. Others stayed, curious, or perhaps morbidly entertained. A mother across the square held her child closer and turned her back. At the edge of the square, a weather-worn man slowed his cart. He was tall, with graying hair tied back and hands calloused from years of labor. His name was Jalel, a farmer from the hill country who had come to trade wheat and oil. He narrowed his eyes at the scene in front of him. He stepped off his cart and walked toward the platform. "Is this what we've come to?" he asked, voice quiet but sharp, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. The father turned toward him, his expression defiant but weary. "You don't know what it's like to starve," he muttered. "I've no coin, no land. These girls, they're not worth dying in the mud for." Jalel's gaze moved from the man to the girls, and his eyes locked briefly with the eldest's. She did not speak, but there was a flicker of life there, something not quite hope, but not yet gone either. "You'd sell your own blood?" Jalel asked, voice thickening. "I'd rather see them fed than buried. What's it to you?" Jalel took a step forward. "I'll take them," he said. "All 4. The father blinked, confused. "You'll pay." "No," Jalel said firmly. "Not to own. I'll give them a home. Not a price." Laughter erupted from a man in the crowd, but it quickly died when Jalel turned his steady gaze on him. The father hesitated, then shrugged, as if relieved. "Take them, then. They're yours to deal with now." The girls remained frozen in place until Jalel climbed the platform and extended a hand to the eldest. Slowly, cautiously, she took it. He helped her down, then reached out for the others, one by one. No words passed between them. They simply followed him, like shadows peeling away from the place they had nearly disappeared in. And as Jalel guided them toward his cart, the villagers watched, not cheering, not protesting, only watching, as something in the square shifted, quietly but forever. The journey back to Jalel's farm took most of the afternoon. The girls sat silently in the cart, their eyes fixed on the road or the sky, stealing glances at Jalel when they thought he wasn't looking. The youngest, Amal, clutched her older sister Yasmin's hand the entire way. No one spoke. The wheels of the cart creaked under the weight of silence and uncertainty. As they passed the low stone wall that marked the edge of Jalel's land, the golden light of late afternoon bathed the fields. Rows of olive trees lined the hills, and tall stalks of wheat swayed gently in the breeze. The farmhouse came into view, modest, made of sun-baked brick and wood, with blue shutters and a wide porch shaded by a grapevine-covered trellis. Chickens clucked nearby, and smoke drifted from the chimney where supper was being prepared. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was in her 50s, with silver threads in her dark braid and sharp, kind eyes that saw everything at once. This was Mira, Jalel's wife. She stepped forward without hesitation, scanning the faces of the 4 girls as her husband helped them down from the cart. He said only, "They'll be staying." Mira looked at the girls, at their bare feet, their sunburnt cheeks, the guarded way they stood close together, and she nodded. She didn't ask questions, not yet. Instead, she opened the door wide and said, "Come in. You're safe here." Inside, the house smelled of lentils, bread, and lavender. The girls stood in the doorway, uncertain, until Mira gently guided them in. She brought water in a clay pitcher and set out bowls of warm soup. They ate slowly, as though still waiting for someone to yank it away. Mira didn't speak much as she worked. She simply offered fresh clothes, soft linen sheets, and warm water to wash with. The 4 sons arrived home before sunset. Rafiq, the eldest, broad-shouldered and quiet, was the first to notice the change in the air. He stopped in the doorway, eyes flicking toward the unfamiliar figures sitting near the fire. Behind him came Samir, lean and clever-eyed, then Tariq, with a dirt-smeared face and an easy smile, and lastly Hamza, the youngest, still a boy in many ways but with a heart already too big for his chest. Jalel explained only what was needed. "They've come from the village. Their home was broken. They will live with us now." None of the sons questioned him. They nodded, some more awkwardly than others, and offered respectful greetings. The girls responded softly, uncertain still of their place in this strange, quiet home. That first night, they slept in the loft above the main room. Mira had laid out mats and extra blankets, and for the first time in what felt like years, the girls slept under a roof without fear of being woken by fists or orders. In the weeks that followed, the house shifted gently to accommodate its new rhythm. The sisters began to help in the kitchen, in the fields, with the animals. Layla, the eldest, surprised everyone by repairing a broken door hinge with tools from the shed. Yasmin took to the garden, her hands always in the soil. Hannah found her way to Myra's side, learning to bake bread and stitch linen. Amal, quiet and timid, spent her time near the olive trees, drawing shapes in the dirt and watching the youngest son, Hamza, as he read under the branches. The boys adjusted too. Samir teased less. Tarek shared his sketchbook. Rafik began leaving extra tools out, pretending to forget them just so Layla would have a reason to visit the workbench. No one rushed anything. There were no expectations, no pressure, only the slow rebuilding of trust, like stones stacked one at a time to form a foundation. And little by little, the girls began to laugh again. Not often, not loudly, but it was there, evidence that something fragile was beginning to heal. Harvest season arrived with its own kind of music, rustling wheat, the steady rhythm of hands picking fruit, the soft thud of apples landing in baskets. The fields were alive with color and motion, and the farmhouse buzzed with activity from dawn until the stars blinked into the sky. Under this hum of daily work, something quieter was unfolding. Jalel watched it all with eyes that missed nothing. He had always been a man of few words, but his silence now was purposeful. He saw how Lila's face lit up whenever Rafik entered the room, even if she pretended not to notice. He noticed how Samir lingered near Hannah when she sorted lentils on the porch, offering jokes that made her hide her smile. Behind her hand, he watched Tarek grow gentler in Yasmin's presence, his rough humor softening around her. And he saw Hamza teaching Amal her letters under the olive tree, their heads bent close together, her timid hand copying shapes in the dust with careful reverence. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the ridge and the sky blushed violet, Jalel called his sons to the back porch. The girls were inside with Mira, preparing supper. The boys sat around him in a quiet half-circle, smelling of soil and sweat and fresh-cut wheat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "I've watched you." They exchanged glances, unsure whether this was the beginning of praise or a warning. "You care for them," he continued. "Each of you, I see it, and they trust you now." Hamza lowered his gaze, cheeks red. Rafik's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Jalel leaned forward. "If your hearts are true," he said, "ask them. Not because you feel you owe them anything. Not because they were brought here. But because love, when freely given, is stronger than anything taken by force." The air held still. It was Samir who finally spoke, voice softer than usual. "What if they say no?" "Then you honor that," Jalel said. "You protect their choice the way you'd protect their hands." The next morning, one by one, they acted. Rafik waited by the well where Layla came each morning to draw water. He had carved a ring of braided olive wood, rough, imperfect, but made with care. He didn't kneel, but he held it in his palm like something sacred. "Would you walk beside me?" he asked simply. No chains, no demands, just us, together. Layla stared at the ring for a long moment. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then her fingers reached for it, trembling. "I never thought I'd be asked," she said. "Only given, or taken." He closed her fingers around the ring gently. "You're not something to be given." Samir found Hannah gathering herbs near the orchard. He walked beside her silently for several paces before speaking. "I used to think I was clever," he said. "But you quieted something in me I didn't know needed calming." She looked at him, puzzled. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a pressed flower inside. "Would you let me grow old beside you?" Hannah laughed softly, a sound like wind over soft grass. "You're ridiculous," she said. "But yes." Tarek carved a whistle for Yasmin and left it by the window, with a single fig and a note. "Play it if you want me to come talk to you. Break it if you want me gone." She didn't play it for 2 days. Then one morning, he heard the soft call of the whistle as he worked the field. When he arrived, she stood waiting, eyes shining. "Don't talk too much," she warned. "Just listen more than you speak." "I can try," he said, grinning. And Hamza, gentle Hamza, waited for Amal under the olive tree. He had copied the alphabet again, neater this time, and handed her the paper. She held it like it was glass. "You don't have to marry me," he said. "I don't want to frighten you. But I care for you. I'd wait 10 years, if that's what you needed." Amal stared at him, wide-eyed. Then, without a word, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Don't wait 10 years, just stay beside me." That evening, the family gathered under the apricot tree. Mira brought out dates and sweet tea. The girls wore fresh scarves, their smiles shy but real. The sons sat beside them, not as owners, but as equals, hands brushing, glances exchanged like secret songs. Jalel watched them, heart full and quiet. He said nothing. There was no need. The world had shifted once more, and this time, it was the beginning of something whole. The morning sun stretched long shadows over the familiar village square. A soft breeze stirred the dust, carrying with it the smells of ripe figs, fresh bread, and the sweetness of summer harvest. It had been nearly a year since the day Jalel had stopped his cart in this very place, where 4 frightened sisters had stood behind a man who called himself their father, offering them up to strangers. Now, the square was transformed, not by new buildings or grand declarations, but by the quiet return of those once cast aside. A wooden cart pulled in slowly, drawn by a mule and guided by Hamza, his face calm and grown. Sitting beside him were Amal and Yasmin, their scarves bright with indigo and gold, their backs straight. Behind the cart came the rest of the family, Rafik and Layla walking side by side, a wrapped infant in Lila's arms, Samir and Hannah with baskets of herbs and dried fruit balanced on their hips, Tarek, playfully teasing Yasmin, who now wore a simple necklace he had carved from apricot wood. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't need to. The villagers turned to look, one by one, as memories stirred. The same vendor who had once averted his eyes during the auction now stood frozen behind his stall. A woman from the crowd stepped closer, recognition dawning. "Is that, it's them," someone whispered. "The girls from last year." The ones that, they're different now, indeed, they were. Their clothes were clean and lovingly mended, their faces calm and proud. Their eyes no longer darted nervously from side to side. They walked like women who belonged to the land, to each other, and to themselves. Amal handed out olive oil, wrapped in glass jars Mira had saved all year. Yasmin gave a cloth bag of lavender to an old woman who'd once passed her by without a glance. Hannah knelt to offer dried figs to a barefoot child who stared in awe at her silver bracelets. Layla traded grain for spices and bartered with the blacksmith for nails. The men helped load sacks of flour onto carts, smiling easily, never straying far from the women they now called their wives. They did not speak of the past. They didn't need to. News spread through the square like spilled wine, wordless and unstoppable. These were not broken girls rescued by a stranger. They were wives, mothers, sisters, partners. They had returned not to beg, but to trade, to share, to stand as equals. No sign remained of their former father. His house had long since collapsed, roof caved in by wind and time. Some said he'd wandered into the hills and never came back. Others said he was seen begging in the next province, looking years older than he should. But none of the sisters ever spoke his name again. As the day stretched into afternoon, the cart filled with new goods. The family prepared to return to the hills, the farm, and the orchard where the apricot tree now shaded a table large enough for 12. As they left the square, children followed them for a time, laughing and pointing at the carved whistle around Tariq's neck, or the colorful beads braided into Amal's hair. None of the family looked back, but their presence lingered long after the cart turned toward the road. Back at the farm, the air was cooler. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting dappled light across the yard where Mira waited, arms crossed and smiling. The table under the apricot tree had been set for supper. Warm bread, olives, soup scented with cumin and mint. The baby fussed in Lila's arms as Rafiq lifted him gently, whispering something only the boy could hear. Tariq recounted stories from the market, gesturing wildly as Yasmin rolled her eyes. Hannah and Samir laughed over a shared bowl of dates, fingers touching. Amal read aloud, her voice still quiet but steady, as Hamza watched her with open admiration. Jalel sat at the end of the table, hands folded, eyes resting not on any one person but on the whole. He didn't need to speak. His work was done, not in rescuing, not in giving, but in holding space for something to grow that had been nearly destroyed.